The first strike echoed through the forest like a gunshot, sharp and cruel, scattering birds into the gray sky. A heavy branch rose and fell again, landing on the fragile ribs of a motionless dog lying helpless in the mud. His body trembled, not from fear, but from age and pain. The men surrounding him laughed, their boots grinding into the wet earth, their shadows stretching long and dark between the towering pines. They saw only an old animal. They had no idea they were attacking a decorated military hero. And they certainly didn't know that someone was already running toward them, someone who would change everything. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, loyalty, and second chances, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful stories, and subscribe to the channel. Comment below where you're watching from and whether you believe heroes come in all forms, even four-legged ones. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The dog's name was Rex. Once, Rex had leaped from helicopters into hostile territory. He had detected explosives buried beneath sand and snow. He had pulled wounded soldiers to safety while bullets tore through the air. His nose had saved dozens of lives. His courage had earned medals he would never understand and respect he could not read in words but felt in the gentle hands that scratched behind his ears after every mission. But time is undefeated, even for heroes. The once muscular German shepherd now carried the stiffness of arthritis in his hips. His hearing had dulled. His sprint had slowed to a limping trot. After 8 years of service overseas, Rex had been honorably retired. When no one stepped forward to adopt him, a man did. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Hayes had met Rex during his final deployment. Hayes was a Navy SEAL who trusted few people but trusted Rex with his life. In Afghanistan, it was Rex who had alerted them to a hidden IED that would have torn their convoy apart. In Syria, Rex had found a trapped child inside a collapsed building. In the darkest hours of war, when exhaustion blurred judgment and fear crept in like a cold wind, Rex had been steady. Loyal. Unwavering. So when retirement came and the kennel officer quietly mentioned that older dogs were harder to place, Hayes didn't hesitate. He signed the papers and brought Rex home. Home was a quiet town wrapped in forests and mist, where mornings smelled like pine sap and rain. Hayes lived alone in a modest cabin at the edge of town, recovering from his own invisible wounds. Nightmares came often. Loud noises still made him tense. But Rex helped. The old dog would rest his head on Hayes' knee during long, silent evenings. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, when Hayes jolted awake from memories he couldn't escape, Rex would climb awkwardly onto the bed and press close until the shaking stopped. They healed each other. But not everyone saw Rex as a hero. In that same town, a small group of men had carved out a reputation for intimidation. They were local thugs who thrived on fear. They loitered near logging roads, harassed hikers, and preyed on anything weaker than themselves. They masked insecurity with cruelty and called it strength. When they first saw Rex wandering near the edge of the woods one afternoon, slow and limping, they saw an easy target. Hayes had been inside, repairing a leaking sink. Rex had slipped through the slightly open gate, not far, just toward the familiar scent of pine cones and damp earth. His aging legs couldn't carry him quickly anymore. By the time the men surrounded him on the muddy logging path, Rex had nowhere to go. The first shove knocked him sideways. The second kick made him yelp, not loudly, but in confusion. He had known enemies before, but they wore uniforms and carried weapons. These men wore hoodies and sneers. When one of them lifted a thick branch above his head, Rex tried to rise, but his back leg buckled. The branch came down hard. And again. Mud splashed. Pain shot through bone and muscle. But even then, Rex did not bite. Military dogs are trained with discipline beyond instinct. Even in fear, he waited for a command that never came. Back at the cabin, Hayes felt it before he heard it, that subtle, unexplainable shift. Years of combat had sharpened his instincts. He stepped outside, calling Rex's name. No answer. The forest felt wrong. Too still. Then came the faint sound of shouting. Hayes ran. Boots pounded against gravel and then mud. His breath cut through cold air as he sprinted down the logging road. He rounded a bend and saw it, for men towering over a fallen shape he knew better than his own reflection. Something inside Hayes snapped. The thugs barely registered the camouflaged figure charging toward them before he was there. Hayes moved with controlled fury, not reckless rage. Years of training guided every motion. He disarmed the man with the branch in seconds, twisting his arm until the wood fell uselessly into the mud. Another lunged, only to find himself flat on his back, staring up at a man whose calm was more terrifying than any scream. The fight was over almost as quickly as it began. The men stumbled away, bruised and shaken, muttering threats they didn't believe. They hadn't expected resistance. They certainly hadn't expected a Navy SEAL. Hayes dropped to his knees beside Rex. The old dog's chest rose shallowly. His eyes flickered open at the sound of Hayes' voice. There was no anger in them. No fear. Just recognition. Loyalty. Relief. Hayes' hands trembled as he examined the injuries. Bruised ribs. A deep cut along the shoulder. Blood matted in fur that had once gleamed under desert sun. He carefully lifted Rex, cradling him like the pup he once was, and carried him back to the truck. At the veterinary clinic, hours stretched like years. X-rays revealed cracked ribs and internal bruising, but no fatal damage. The vet spoke cautiously about recovery, about age complicating healing. Hayes listened, nodding, refusing to accept anything but survival. That night, Rex lay on a blanket near the fireplace. Hayes sat beside him, back against the wall, refusing to sleep. He remembered the battlefield again, the dust, the gunfire, the moment Rex had stood between him and danger without hesitation. And he whispered promises into the quiet room, promises of protection, of justice, of love that would not fail. Word spread quickly through the small town. People who had never spoken to Hayes before began stopping by with food, with blankets, with soft apologies for not knowing the dog's story sooner. They learned about the medals, about the missions, about the lives saved by a nose and a brave heart. The narrative shifted. Rex was no longer just an old dog. He was a veteran. And the men who had beaten him found something new in their lives, consequences. One of them had recorded part of the attack, intending to share it for laughs. Instead, the video reached the wrong eyes. A former Marine recognized Hayes. Within days, the footage circulated through veteran networks and local authorities. Charges were filed. The town that once ignored the thugs now rejected them openly. Employers distanced themselves. Friends stepped back. Cruelty had finally met accountability. But justice, while necessary, was not what healed Rex. Healing came slowly, measured in small victories. The first time Rex stood without collapsing. The first short walk to the mailbox. The first bark, hoarse but determined, when a squirrel dared to cross the yard. Hayes celebrated each milestone like a battlefield triumph. Weeks turned into months. The scars remained, faint lines beneath fur, reminders of pain. Yet something deeper had changed in the town. The local school invited Hayes to speak about service and loyalty. Children met Rex, gently petting the hero they had seen in the news. Donations poured into organizations supporting retired military dogs. Awareness grew about the sacrifices made not only by soldiers but by the animals who served beside them. Rex, once overlooked in a kennel, became a symbol. On a crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after the attack, Hayes returned to the same logging road. Rex walked beside him, slower than before but steady. Leaves crunched under paws and boots alike. Sunlight filtered through the tall pines, soft and golden. They stopped at the spot where it had happened. Hayes knelt, running his hand through Rex's fur. There was no anger left in his eyes now. Only gratitude. They had faced enemies before, some overseas, some closer to home. And they had survived. Before we reach the end of this journey, I want to ask you something from the heart. If this story has touched you, if it reminded you of the power of loyalty and the importance of standing up for those who cannot defend themselves, please take a moment to like this video and share it. Comment the word loyalty below to honor Rex and all service animals who protect without question. Your engagement helps spread awareness and compassion. The forest stood quiet around them, no longer a place of violence but of resilience. Rex lifted his head, breathing in the scent of earth and pine. His body was older, slower, but his spirit remained unbroken. Hayes realized then that heroes do not retire from courage. They carry it in their bones, even when those bones ache. As they walked back toward the truck, side by side, it was impossible to tell who was leading whom. Because sometimes the bravest warriors have 4 legs, a scarred heart, and a loyalty so fierce it changes the world around them. And sometimes, it takes a moment of darkness for everyone else to finally see the light.